a time in American history where responsible media entities would consider how reporting on dangerous state secrets that could put Americans or our allies in harm's way before just publishing what they've uncovered. But it seems in today's media landscape, the move is to publish first and, maybe ask questions later. That mentality was underscored late last week when a pair of bombshell reports by the New York Times and NBC News, in my view, inched us a little bit closer to war with Russia than we've ever been since the beginning of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. First came the New York Times' report citing senior American officials that the U.S. provided intel about Russian military units that helped Ukrainians target and kill multiple Russian generals over the course of the conflict. That story alone was the stuff World War III could be made of. And a day later, NBC and the Times both took things a step further, with both outlets reporting that the U.S. provided intel that helped Ukrainian forces locate, strike, and sink the Moskva, the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, in April. Both of these are definitely important and interesting, but also truly dangerous in potentially drawing the West into a larger war. The sinking of the Moskva is arguably the biggest black eye to Putin's war effort to date. The ship was often called Russia's pride of the Black Sea. It sunk on April the 14th after being hit by a pair of Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missiles. The ship was one of Russia's most visible assets in the war. The Russian government has claimed that the ship sank because of a fire on board. Now, as expected, in the days following the leaks, the Pentagon refuted NBC and the Times' reporting and downplayed America's role in intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
Do not provide intelligence on the location of senior military leaders on the battlefield or participate in the targeting decisions of the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainians have, quite frankly, a lot more information than we do. We are not the only sole source of intelligence and information to the Ukrainians. They get intelligence from other nations as well, and they have a pretty robust intelligence collection capability of their own. I mean, they've been fighting this war against Russia for 8 years. It's not like they are completely blind to the way Russia organizes itself and the way Russia conducts itself on the battlefield.
Now, if the stories were true, untrue, exaggerated, well, if they were untrue or exaggerated, that's even more reckless on the part of the Times and NBC, but Kirby may just be doing damage control. Now, President Biden has reportedly been furious over the leaks. Not surprisingly, right? He's worried that that kind of reckless talk could force us into an unintended war with Russia. And that is a sentiment shared by the New York Times' own Tom Friedman, who wrote, quote, "The staggering takeaway from these leaks is that they suggest we're no longer in an indirect war with Russia, but rather are edging toward a direct war, and no one has prepared the American people or Congress for that. Vladimir Putin surely has no illusions about how much the U.S. and NATO are arming Ukraine with material and intelligence, but when American officials start to brag in public about playing a role in killing Russian generals and sinking the Russian flagship, killing many sailors, we could be creating an opening for Putin to respond in ways that could dangerously widen this conflict and drag the U.S. in deeper than it wants to be." Yes, that's part of it. But it also used to be that journalists seriously weighed the potential impact their reporting could have on national security before they ran a story. I'll give you an example. Prior to publishing the top-secret Pentagon Papers in the 1970s, the Times spent 3 months going over the more than 7,000 pages of documents, trying to ensure that military secrets that would negatively impact national security, or might, or that could put our troops in harm's way, were not included in what they ran. Look, I'm a huge advocate of the First Amendment, a big defender of free speech. I think investigative reporting is incredibly important. But when it comes to issues this tender, this dangerous, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that, I wish they hadn't published these stories. Whether they're accurate, mostly inaccurate, at the least, I would hope that they would consult with our leaders about the impact that the reporting could have on our national security. I very much doubt that they did, and many will say that what I am proposing here and what I am saying is journalistic heresy. So joining me now is Frank Sesno, former CNN Washington bureau chief and the director of strategic initiatives at George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. All right, Frank, so I don't actually know what you're going to say about this, but I'm truly interested in whether you think that I am sort of off the grid on this, or if you agree with me or somewhere in between.
Probably somewhere in between. I mean, I think the story was a shocking story. When I first saw it, I thought, this must be a deliberate leak by the United States to send a signal to Putin that we've got eyes on you all over the place and you're going to get away with nothing. And of course, when I read the reporting that Biden was furious and the stuff that Tom Friedman wrote, I thought, well, wait a minute, someone was off the reservation here. And that someone are those people who leaked the story. I don't agree, Dan, that there's a similarity between this particular story and the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers were something that the Times poured over, just as they did the Panama Papers. This is a moving story, a daily story from the war, from the battlefront. And there actually is a case that can be made that the American people do need to know the degree to which the United States is getting involved in this, so no one later down the line can say, how come nobody reported this when we got in drip, 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 and suddenly we found ourselves in much more deeply than the American people were prepared for or ready to pursue.
But see, I guess I would argue that this is even more dangerous than publishing the Pentagon Papers, right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, the Pentagon Papers was about history, right? It was about something that had happened years earlier. Here you're talking about something that's happening in real time that has truly the potential to magnify everything that is happening. Let me ask it to you this way. Would you hope that the editors of the New York Times and NBC News, before they publish something this explosive, would at least run it by and I'm not talking about asking for comment. I'm talking about asking, is what we're about to report potentially dangerous to the United States? Talk to us about that. Do you hope that conversation happened? Do you think it happened?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know whether it happened. I hope it did. So when I was bureau chief, you mentioned that I was bureau chief. I had conversations like this, and our standards, Dan, were that we were on the outlook for any story that could compromise lives or ongoing operations, and we were very sensitive to that. We were also sensitive to stories, and I was on the receiving end of phone calls at times where Pentagon or other officials would call and say, please hold this story. We understand you have this story. Please hold this story. And I would want them to lay out what was behind that, what were their concerns.
Talk to me about that, because we're also talking about, no offense to you, Frank, a bit of a different age, right? And a different, a bit of a different era when you were back there, all right? But those conversations you would have, would you at times say, okay, I mean, for example, in this particular situation, if you were at CNN at the time and you had this information coming from government officials and the government says to you, Frank, you can't publish this. You can't do this. It's too dangerous. It is potentially going to bring us to World War III. What do? You
would look at that. You would look, what did your sources say? Who are they? How many are they? What is their agenda? And Dan, here's where it gets really sensitive. And yeah, I'm of a different age, but this is not reporting from Jurassic Park. This is the real deal. You have to ask yourself as a journalist a very serious question about the trade-off between the national security value and sensitivity of this information and the public's need or right to know. Mm-hmm. And that's murky business. So in this particular case, I would want to know more about who these sources were. I would want to know more, as I said, about what is their agenda. Those conversations should have happened. I would actually be surprised if they didn't.
Oh, come on. I do not believe they. I'm telling you, in this again, I shouldn't say it with such confidence.
I find it really hard to believe because, as you said, I had the same reaction when I read these stories that you did. It's like, oh my God, right. Are you kidding? How is this going to get read?
Right.
They're going to say, well, okay. Of course, on the other hand, it's not exactly a secret that the United States and NATO are providing intelligence to the Russians. Right. I mean, after all, they're carting in billions of dollars of weapons. So I think Putin knows a little bit here of what he's up to.
Sure, but that's the point. Then you could argue that's not even newsworthy, right? If what you're saying is true, then, oh, you know what? It's not even really news that they're doing. That's the why report. Let me play a piece of sound. This is Jen Psaki talking about the leaks today.
The president was displeased with the leaks. His view was that it was an overstatement of our role, an inaccurate statement, and also an understatement of the Ukrainians' role and their leadership, and he did not felt they were constructive.
Now, I don't know if that's true or not true, but if it was an overstatement of our role, then it's even more reckless. by
if the
them to
story's
do
wrong,
right?
of course, right? If the story's wrong.
No, I don't mean wrong. I mean an overstatement, right? That it's fundamentally, yes, it's true, but they overstated it. They oversold it. They made the headline more splashy than it needed to be. This has been ongoing. I mean, again, this is so serious. And I just feel like these days, many in the media care first and foremost about making sure they get the story out first and always say it under the banner of it's the public's right to know. And I feel like not enough journalists say, I need to balance that on occasion, on that rare occasion, with national security. Take the final word on this, Frank.
I just see it a little bit differently, Dan. I think that I share your concern. The story should have been vetted. I find it very hard to believe that professional journalists and editors didn't put it through the ringer in very much the same way that you're discussing. I also think that there was probably a robust conversation internally that people need to know this, and it's not even all that surprising. So I think this is a gray area.
Yeah.
It's not quite as black and white as you portray.
Look, I hope they did. I'll say I hope they did. I hope they did, but I will tell you, this scares the heck out of me. This kind of story, seeing Friedman's reporting after this. Anyway, Frank Sesno, always appreciate your insight and you coming on the show. Thank you.
I enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.